It is always a pleasure when I have Coach Robb on the show. This dude is so knowledgeable, and I love just how freewheeling he is with information. He let us know why him and Dungey. A lot of people don't know, Coach Robb and Ryan Dungey partnered up, and it was kind of a weird and bewildering split. Nobody ever really knew the story. Coach tells us. And I'll tell you what, if you have an amateur racer and you want to develop them into a pro, you need to listen to this show. Listen to this show. You will learn so much information and valuable information that'll help you throughout your son or daughter's careers. You guys know the sponsors. I couldn't do this stuff without them. So Nano-Extreme, best pain solution out there. This stuff's so good. Head over to Nano-Extreme. Use code COOKSY for free shipping. Of course, Coach Robb, and he's got his video consultations in the link below. Alias MX gear. Their 2026 lineup will be dropping soon. Head over to Alias MX. Precision Transport, a family-owned and just a really good shipping company that you can trust. Pretransport.com. And then my buddy Chris over at Ride Strapped. Goggles, glasses, and I've got some exciting stuff that I want to announce from Chris, but I got to wait until he's got it dialed in. But I'm going to have to save that for another day. So head over to Ride Strapped and get your goggles, glasses, or just one of the softest, nicest shirts you'll ever. If you buy one of these shirts, you will thank me later. They're so comfortable.
You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
All right, guys. So you know one of my favorite guests and somebody that I just enjoy talking to, Coach Robb Beams. How you doing, my friend?
Good early morning, buddy. Thank you so much for squeezing me in. I know you've got a really busy schedule, but I appreciate the invite. It's always good to catch up with you and the Cooksey Mob, man. And by the way, congratulations to your Cooksey Mob numbers growing. I correct me if I'm wrong. It's got to be one of the largest in percentages of growth. I know, at least in this first quarter, from what I've seen. Am I right or wrong?
I don't compare it with other people. I know it's growing considerably, and all I'm trying to do is make sure anyone who subscribes to this channel gets the content that I promise.
Well, I'm impressed that you're able to put out the amount of content that you're doing. You're almost up to like 4 to 6 times a week, and that's a lot of work. So congratulations to you, and I love seeing the big numbers. And to everybody who's watching this, and for those of you who have subscribed, congratulations and welcome to the Cooksey Mob. It's cool.
Yeah, and it's funny, people say, oh, YouTube, they think you're like unemployed. I'm like, man, I put more work in on my videos than I probably have in any other job. But just because I enjoy it doesn't make it not work. But I put in more than 50 hours every week.
Absolutely. Well, if anybody who uses editing software and stuff like that, yeah, like you said, there's a lot more that goes into it, especially when you do it correctly and you've got B-roll and, look at the quick turnaround of current events, and then within 24 hours you have something up. So yeah, I respect what you're doing, especially as you declare it's not like you have a crew of 5 or 6 people that are helping you with capturing the content and editing it. So congratulations.
Yeah, I have a bunch of departments. They're all sitting in the chair I'm sitting in right now. So
yep, redefines having multiple hats, right?
But you got to be able to do everything, and at some point I'm going to have to expand here. I love that I'm getting to that point, and that's where I've kind of struggled with business as far as how do you let go of your baby and start trusting other people to take the same mission. But I'll get there. I got to lean on guys like you, Mike Grandal, and some legends in business that I can kind of lean on as I grow this thing.
No, it's all good. But Cooksey Mob, thanks for all the support. We definitely appreciate it.
Coach, so I've been dying to get your take on this. So Hayden Degan, I know you're old school. You like guys to get up there, be humble, thank people. What did you think of Hayden Degan when he won his championship in Colorado? I got to know what you're thinking, Coach.
It's funny you ask. You're right. I'm going to be the Jeff Stanton kind of fan. Gets up there, lets his winning do all the talking, clean cut. You're exactly right. I've always kind of gravitated towards those types of champions. I like Degan because of his dynamic personality. To say that his speech was a little bit rough around the edges, I just can't imagine. As like my dad always said, before you get pissed off at somebody, ask what you've done to contribute to this situation. Number one, and I don't know, well, I do know how you feel because you've said it on your videos and I concur, that pass was far from malicious. You know what I mean? If he wanted to punt him into the cheap seats, he certainly could have done it. Cole's already said, hey, look, I left it as wide open, could drive a train through there. I left it so far open. That was not an aggressive pass. But the idea that, and this is where I'm still astounded. I could not imagine being there. I just won. He finally found out he won the championship, and to get that level of booze, and that's the worst he had to say about it. He's a bigger man than I am, because I would have told everybody right where they could have put it. And yeah, I'm with you. I'm just like, yeah, I know some people are, and something that was brought up, and I got a DM on this, and it was pretty. I love Jet Lawrence. I think he's a great kid, great family. The thing that I was surprised about was when Jet said, "Everybody can suck it."
Down with the team around me and they're super happy, and yeah, for everyone who doubted, suck it.
He didn't get written up. He didn't get a reprimand. He didn't get a financial fine. And I love Jet. Nobody saw Jet's comment like that as if it was foul mouthed or anything like that. So to me, a little bit of a double standard going on there. But no, I didn't think it was all that bad.
Coach, you got me here. I totally forgot. When did Jet say it?
I think it was somewhere right after he had won the 450 championship, about people saying he couldn't do it. I'd have to go back and get the context of it. Somebody had DM'd me on, I can't even take credit for it. The idea that, Jet had mentioned that, and I vaguely remember it. And I think it was after the championship, because as a rookie, he was doing things that people thought he couldn't do. I think it was also after he had yard darted himself at that opening round. He didn't have to try to jump that downhill triple, whether they cut it down or whatever, and then yard darted himself, and everybody, for whatever reason, human nature is we want to try to pick on the guy that's at the top. So everybody was like, oh, let's see how this clown's able to bounce back from that, because he did it to himself. And then he was able to prove, as Degan has done, he's able to pull out of that mental hole, if you will. Cooper Webb's done a phenomenal job with it here just in the last 3 weeks. So yeah, if you look at history, Jace with Chipsy Tales brought it up on the interview in the press conference about Degan saying, hey, season didn't start out the way you wanted it. We have no idea how dark, well, you do, because you've been through hell and back, but how dark it is when people are beating up on you. And like with Degan, expected to come out and clean the floor, and he didn't the first couple of rounds. He had to dig out of that. And that was I thought Jace did a great job of bringing up the mental challenges of that. Just like Webb getting a beat down by 24 seconds, and listening to all of the talking pundits, every online magazine, Webb got the shit beat out of him. He got humiliated. A champion should never be able to do that, or never let that happen. Then he comes out the next week and then he puts a beat down on. Think about, as a listener, right? As I say that, put yourself in that position. Could you dig yourself out of that? Which leads back to what you said about Degan. You just won your championship and the crowd is booing over essentially a bump pass. Now, granted, Daniel Blair brought up a pretty good point. Do you hit your own teammate that hard? Do you have to bump him off the track? I understand what Daniel's saying, but like Degan said, he's in those last 2 laps, he told himself, I'm going to win. And if Davies leaves that door open, you've got something coming, and he got it. It could have been much worse, that's for sure.
Well, I had an angle on it. I mean, you can say there's contact, but Davies almost initiated that contact with the angle he came in on the turn. So, yeah. I mean, but he'll learn from that. And I think this kid is going to be something special. But I'm really interested, and this will air after Salt Lake, but it's going to be interesting to see how he responds, because when you have this huge defeat, I mean, it almost ruined Joey Savacci, or probably did. Like, he was never the same after Zach Osborne smashed him in Vegas. A lot of times a quarterback will go out and throw an important interception, and their confidence is shot, and they never come back. You're talking about Cole? Yeah. Will Cole come back? When these guys throw a big interception, can they come back, or does it crush their confidence and they're never the same? They don't have that swagger. I think he'll be fine, but that's what I'm going to be watching for in Salt Lake.
Yeah. I hope people don't take this as I hope people understand our intention whenever we put something out there. If you've ever been around New Zealanders, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think it'll be water off a duck's back. Australians and New Zealanders, those are some of the most insanely tough people I've ever seen. And I've been very fortunate. I've been all around the world doing performance camps. And if you've ever spent any time with New Zealanders or Australians, they'll tell you exactly what they think. And there's no harsh feelings. They'll call a spade, and then they move on. With Cole, he owned it. One of the things I thought was very, very cool is, did you see the videos? There's several of them floating around. How many of those 450 riders walked over and gave him some words of encouragement when he was sitting there by himself? It was almost like it was, I hate to say it, but it's like it was orchestrated, right? It was interesting how one after another just walked right over to him. And I think it says a lot for everybody in all classes, 250, 450 combined. They realize Cole Davies is something special. I mean, the fact that we're hearing some scuttlebutts that people are saying as a rookie, his results are better than Jet Lawrence. If that doesn't put things into perspective pretty quickly, you're like, whew. And you add to that how tough the New Zealanders are. Who's his mentor? Ben Townley, one of the most mentally tough people that has ever raced a dirt bike. Yeah, I'm not worried about Cole Davies at all. In fact, I think to your point, he'll use it as ammunition. I think he's going to be more lethal now. I don't think we'll see a big fight from Degan. Why should he? He's already got the championship. Like you said in your last video, he's already getting ready for outdoors. He's not. Here's a question I have for all the listeners. I'd love for you guys to put it in the comments. Do you think that Degan, like I say, this will come out unfortunately after Salt Lake, but do you think, or rather, it will be relevant? Do we see Degan on a Supercross hangover when we go outdoors? Yes or no?
Well, I'll tell you what, Coach. I think we would have if he had to take it to Salt Lake. Since he had this extra week to relax, I don't think we're going to. And I think that was a lot of what's weighing on him is he's got this championship to defend and he still hasn't locked it up, but it looks positive. And you of all people know how much mental stress wears on the body. That extra week of recovering without that is so huge.
I just don't see Degan laying down. He's won that championship for him and Brian and the family. It's another checkbox. I see him coming out with absolute double barrels outdoors. And I mean, let's face it. And I hope people don't take this the wrong way. Degan's much better outdoors than he is indoors, and the fact that he won the championship indoors. Now he's good indoors. Don't get me wrong. But when you look at some of the stuff he did outdoors, remember that opening lap where he's freaking half hanging off the motorcycle. I mean, he wants to win so bad, and outdoors is more of his playground. I don't know if that's just because he's so recently left amateur motocross. And you think about the amateur motocross, that's it. It's all outdoors. That's his playground. I think we're in for one hell of a summer because I know Cole Davies is ready to go outdoors. You bring back a healthy Pierce Brown.
I don't think Pierce is back.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
But Chance Hymas is the one that's really got his eye on him.
Well, but think about it. You got a restock of all the PC guys. So now you've got 5 more badasses on PC coming out plus Seth. Then let's say Seth wins it. I don't see Seth having a Supercross hangover. I think he'll be physically and mentally a little bit tired, but you still have 5 other guys on PC. Let's see if Joe, because like you said in your last show, Joe's up for his contract. So he's hungry and he didn't have the most stellar Supercross season. So if he can redeem himself outdoors, and then you put that against Cole Davies, and then you put that against Hayden Degan, not to forget Moseman back out. I mean, it's just when we hit the reset button to go outdoors and you have Degan and Cole Davies, and then you start putting in Beaumare. I mean, we could go team by team by team. I hate to say it, but 250 class outdoors is going to be as exciting as it was indoors.
Well, and you haven't even mentioned the world champion, Tom Vial.
That's why I was saying if you go team by team, right? So then you look at the KTM guys with Beaumare and Vial. You've got the 5, possibly 6 riders at PC. You've got Joe and Hymas coming back at Honda. It's just like, man. And then Club MX, they've got a stocked field as well. So, yeah, I hate the idea that the attrition rate, I saw a statistic yesterday that there's 22 250s that are out going into Salt Lake. And there's 7 450s that are out, factory riders that are out. Doesn't make for really a lot of pomp and circumstance at Supercross. Still, the best riders in the world are still out there on the Supercross track, just not as many of them. But then you think about if we get a reset with those guys and we go outdoors, at least for the first couple of rounds, it's going to be unbelievable, very much like Supercross was this year. I mean, think about when we talked about the 450s getting ready to start. What was there? I don't know the exact number, but there were the number of 250 champions that were lining up in the gate for the 450s superseded the 22 spots that were on the main event gate.
Yeah, it was crazy. And they didn't last long, but yes, it started as the most stacked ever, which will probably change next year. But we're in this weird time where we have an overlap. We have a generation coming in and a generation that's stuck around. In our sport, we haven't got that very much. Remember when Bradshaw, Matasevich, and Kudrowski came in, but we still had Stanton, Ward, and Johnson? Like 1990 was one of those years, but we're getting a few of those now. These guys are sticking around longer.
100%. And this is where it's interesting when you look at how do you build longevity with these athletes? We don't have to get into, the performance enhancing drugs, the peptides, all the things that these guys are using. The reality of it is, if you look at most endurance athletes, right, there are some few exceptions. There's a couple like Laidlow and Dietliff that are like 22, 23 years old. And since they were kids, they focused on the long distance triathlon, where historically You'd go Olympic distance, you'd go half Ironman, you go Ironman. You'd see the endurance athletes coming into their own at 32, 36, 38 years old. And those dudes, between the durability and then what we call athletic maturity, they know how to win races. They know how to train themselves to not bury the hatchet every day so they can bounce back. And then you look at somebody like a Ken Roxon. You look at somebody like a Justin Brayton. You look at somebody, you can go down the list of almost all the 450 riders, of course, with the exception of Jet. Jet blows everything out of the water. Tomac, Webb. You look at the ages of these guys, and they're not, I'm not saying that they're old, but by moto standards compared to Degan and Jet, they're a little bit on the older side of things, and they're still hauling the mail. And that's the part that I think is so impressive. You watch that on a Saturday night and you're like, stop and think about how many years they've been doing it. How do they stay motivated? Yeah, put jokes aside about money and all that. I don't think Tomac's motivated by money. I think Tomac's motivated by, he just wants to win. Webb, he wants to win. And I think Degan, same way. Yeah, the money's great and that's all part of it, but goodness, he's been making great money since he's been on 65s. Let's face it. Money is not the issue, what motivates. And that's what I love about champions. They're not motivated by money. They're motivated by the achievement, the journey, the process. And those are the ones that you see sticking around for a long period of time. Tomac's a great example.
Yeah, and that's what I've got an interview coming out, which will be already be out when this goes out. But I talked with AJ Pleasanton. AJ writes crypto, and we were talking about that, and I was just like, people are going to race. You could put $1 billion or $1 up there, and these guys have that same desire to win. And I always bitch, about money, and they need to share it to make those guys healthy. But it's not the money that motivates them. That's just a byproduct of having a professional season and professional career to go for. But yeah, it doesn't matter. They are going to race for $1 or $1 billion. That desire, that to win, is that's inside them. So
well, I want to make sure I don't misquote myself. When I'm talking money motivates everybody for sure, and I do agree with you. The disparity, and I'm certainly not into redistribution of wealth, that. But when you look at the idea that the disparity between let's say the top 10 factory riders and then that gap down to the top privateer, yeah, it's ridiculous. And you've stated it numerous times, these teams, when they get on struggle bus on race budgets, if you just essentially emulate Formula One or MotoGP or football, baseball, soccer, and it doesn't matter, people say that we're a niche sport, as you declare all the time. I don't own a Formula One race car, neither does any of the listeners, but we all love it. And, I looked it up because that Netflix special came out that they call it The Seat. That's the new, that's what they're calling it now. Instead of Drive to Survive, it's called The Seat. And, you've got Hamilton, who left Mercedes. They bring in literally this guy. They took him from, how we have like at the MXGPs, you have, MXGP all the way down to 3. They brought the youngest kid in the history and they moved him all the way to the seat in Mercedes-Benz. And in his first race, he gets 5th. So it's a really cool special if you haven't seen it. Well, listening to you talk about the idea that if we shared some of the wealth of the TV packages and the merchandise packages, again, we're not into redistribution of wealth, but just let's kind of just spread the wealth around a little bit. I just looked it up. I said, what's the highest paid Formula One racer? I don't even know the gentleman's name, but he's getting paid $65 million a year. And then Hamilton's getting 62 or 60 million a year. Now, is Mercedes paying that? No. It's to your point exactly, is it's filtering down to the teams. The teams can pay a good amount of money, but then there's that TV revenue and stuff. What I think is so interesting is when you bring it up, people think that you're on some kind of a hate train about like trying to shed light on it. But yet we go and we look at other sports and we go, look at how cool it is. You've got Hamilton that's making $60 million. Wow, wouldn't that be cool? Why can't we get even remotely close to that? Why can't a Kevin Morantz make $2 million a year? We all know him by name. We all love to watch him. Why hasn't Kyle Chisholm been making $1 million a year for the last 31 years that he's been racing? Right. I mean, if you think about Kyle Chisholm, I actually worked with him under the Toyota Moving Forward program. The people that were eligible for that were the Trey Kennards, the Matt Bonnies, the Austin Stroops, right? Think about that generation. Kyle Chisholm was on the gate with them. Think about who Kyle Chisholm has raced against. Ricky Carmichael, James Stewart, Bill Opoto, Dungey, Webb, Roxon, Hayden, Jet. I mean, think about that spectrum of years. And Chisholm has not made nearly as much money as he, and I hate to use the word should have made because I don't like the word should, couldn't. But the idea here is, man, your idea is not far-fetched. if you just look at some of these other models.
It's exactly what you said, Coach. You get this name recognition of this star that we want to see. The problem is the only way to make money is from a team. And now, if the series did what Formula One, football, baseball, basketball, if they invested in their own product, these guys, like say Tomac this year, he doesn't have a ride from Star Yamaha because he wanted too much money or whatever the deal. If there was a good purse money and they paid back, these guys would still stick around. But if he can't get a factory contract that's lucrative, there is no reason. He could go out and win and he'll barely break even.
Here's what scares me on what you just said about the purse. I think 99% of our listeners are aware of the fact that the MXGPs have no purse. How long is it going to be before Outdoor Nationals no longer has a purse? I don't think it's very far. I don't.
I honestly think in the current climate, with the teams kind of waking up and seeing exactly how much is available with the TV contract and everything, I think if they tried to go backwards, I just don't see it increasing. But I think if they try to wipe it out completely, there will be an uproar.
Yeah, but think about how much the MXGPs and the Outdoor Nationals, it's not a surprise where the Motocross Destinations are at this year. If you're surprised by that venue, then you're not paying attention. So to me, if you look at how they emulate off of each other, you talked about businesses, right? When I was in the grocery business, ironically, the CEO of our grocery store chain was Adam C's grandfather, Mike Cianciarillo. And we would network with a company called Harris Teeter up in the Carolinas. So we take our top executives, they go up, they'd spend a week with their executives, they tour the stores, they look at ideas and concepts, they come down and visit with us, we'd share ideas, and we'd share, that distributes. You look at how these business models have been kind of emulating each other. If you look at the way MXGPs look very similar to the Outdoor Nationals, the Outdoor Nationals look very similar to the MXGPs. When you start looking at some of the adjustments and the rules and the changes, if you're paying a little bit of attention, and so what? So there's going to be a little bit of an upheaval. You just tease that people will be willing to race for $1. So
yeah.
If you look at MXGPs, right, it's not like I will admit that there's not a full gate of 42 guys at an MXGP, but we're still watching them. There's still a TV package. There's still races going on. Yeah, people are going to complain about it initially, but how did the MXGPs, I think that's run by Giuseppe, if I'm not mistaken, right? It doesn't matter that you can get all the blowback that you want. He's stuck to his, hey, this is what we're doing. And then you still see the factory teams are all there. So that's what scares me about when you look at the MXGPs, you look at the Outdoor Nationals, you look at the fact that Destinations came to a track that's owned by the same promoters that have the Outdoor Nationals. You look at how some of the things, the marketing, the way that they're doing camping and all this other stuff. Somebody had hit me up and said that they bought a VIP package and went to the Destinations last year, and it's $600 more here stateside. It's just, again, it's not about character assassinating the promoters. It's the idea that the people that are the show, unfortunately, are not getting a percentage of it. And going back to the idea about business, if you look at good businesses, they emulate other good businesses. They network with other good businesses. So when you look at I hate to use the word union because some people don't like that, but once the players union came into football and baseball, what happened? Everybody started making more money, including the team owners. So how is that a loss for anybody that enjoys the sport? If you're talking about duplicating success, we're not reinventing the wheel. You're just duplicating success. And yes, I know that there's quite a few more baseball players than there are motocrossers, but think about it. If somebody listening to the show has a young athlete and he knows that he's got a path to go to the big leagues, i.e., you got a little peewee baseball player that knows there's the Major League baseball team, he's got a plan, whether it's going through college or going directly into pros. Our 65 riders, they do not have a definitive plan. It's all a spray and pray format, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, 100%. And speaking of young athletes, you've been doing phone consults and kind of helping some of these young riders that we've seen so many of them burn out. What's too young? What's too late? When should somebody call you, Coach?
Boy, this is an interesting question because literally just this week, I received a phone call from, ironically, an MXGP rider, and he's 17 years old. And anybody who's under 18, I will not talk to them on the phone without a parent for obvious reasons. And this gentleman said his opening comment was, Rob, my son's tired. And so I asked him, I said, well, how many hours a week are you training? Because by definition, overtraining is not absorbing the work that you're doing. It's not how many hours of work you're doing. It's can you absorb what you're doing? And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, how many hours are you training on the motorcycle and off the motorcycle? He said, 9 hours. I said, okay. I've got professional triathletes that train 40 plus hours. So if I've got an athlete that can train 40 hours a week and isn't tired, you see where 9 hours cannot be declared as overtraining? And he's like, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, let me ask you this. Is your son tired because he's overworked or because he's under recovered? And there was kind of a pause there. And he goes, I've never thought about it that way. Now, the reason why I bring it up in that context is the definition of overtraining is not absorbing what you're doing. He, at 9 hours, is not getting enough food, sleep, and water to absorb it. Therefore, his son is tired. He trains with I'm not going to mention who it is, but he trains with a riding coach, and it's grind, grind, grind. So for the hours that he is on the bike, it's very, very high intensity all the time. Well, he just simply can't recover from it. Now you come back to the other side of the equation. At the middle of our conversation, his dad interrupts me and he says, where were you 5 years ago? Now I want you to do the math on this, Chris. I'm not trying to insult your math skills. I know it's early. If I talk to a parent of a 12-year-old, they'll say, Rob, nutrition, physiology, sports psychology, we don't want to take the fun out of it. We want to keep it fun for little Johnny. So you go and whether you work with a riding coach or you're at a facility, and those people don't have anything relevant to a background of exercise physiology. So every time they put your athlete on the track, it's balls to the walls, rip, 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 rip. It's the analogy of you buying a brand new bike, put it in second gear and go ride 4 20-minute motos only in second gear at Glen Helen or Millville. You've only got a certain amount of hours on the bike, but it's excessively stressed, right? Well, the same thing happens here. I talk to a parent of a 12-year-old and they go, oh, that's too complicated. We don't care about that. Little Johnny can eat Cocoa Puffs and he can spend all night on Xbox until they can't do it anymore. And so that's what this dad was saying. He's like, man, if we had found you when we were 12 and we kind of hedged off where we're at right now, because unfortunately at 17 years old, it's over. And I don't want that to sound crass. With our top runners, we have a couple marathoners that are like a 2:08, 2:10 marathon, world-class runners, right? Well, it doesn't matter what you do the first 20 miles of a marathon. We say that you've got to get to mile 20 and then the race actually begins, because the race is won in the last 10K. If you follow anything about marathons, the race is always won in the last 10K. So when I hear an athlete who's 17 years old, to me, like any athlete that we work with, Chase DeShiel, Soren, Staudinger from Australia, our goal is that when they get to 17, like I told what's now 18, be pro here in the States, right? I say to them, your race is now beginning. Your job is just beginning. This is when it gets hard. But the problem is, and we could go through a multitude of amateurs that had stellar amateur careers that have somewhat stagnated and even gone backwards since they went pro. You see where I just look at it and I just scratch my head and I'm like, an 85 parent says it's too complicated. And then when it's time to get real, the athlete's already been smoked by trainers and facilities who are uneducated, no experience. Ironically, their pro career didn't amount to much anyways, but now they're considered consummate experts on physiology and nutrition. Like I've said to you publicly before, I've owned hundreds of dirt bikes. I started riding in 78, but I can promise you Mitch Payton should not hire me as a factory mechanic. That I can promise you. Now I can tear down a bike. I can work on a bike, but I'm certainly not going to spin wrenches for McAdoo and do it with any kind of confidence. That's for darn sure. And that's the part to me where I've just sometimes scratched my head. I'm like, I feel so bad for the parents of the 17-year-old that were given a lot of misinformation because there's no accountability. Those people that smoked that man's son, where's the accountability? Oh, they're busy working with another group of athletes that because they were ex-pros, now all of a sudden they get to work with them. Well, Chris, let's say I'm an uneducated trainer and I just smoked your son. Well, too bad, Chris. What are you going to do? Sue me? And that's where I have a really big problem, because with our coaches, we have a coaching certification program. All of our coaches know that they're accountable. If I run Chris's son into the ground, I'm responsible. I'm not just going to say, sorry, Chris, too bad. I hope your son can figure it out. Which, by the way, guess what the ironic fix for adrenal fatigue is?
Rest and food.
It's a crazy idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet when I show an athlete that they're calorically in the hole 1,000, sometimes even up to 2,000 calories, and you're like, look, you got to eat more. And they're like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, okay, so you get a brand new race motor from HP Development. You don't run enough oil in it. It grenades. And then you blame HP Development. that's what I see when I hear parents but the parents don't know. And that's what pisses me off. They're putting trust in a so-called trainer, a facility, whatever these titles are nowadays. A lot of times it's overpaid man friend. But the idea here is like, what is it that you're wanting to get out of it for your athlete? Where's the checks and balances to make sure that your son or daughter is actually growing and getting stronger, not just chronically run into the ground? At 17, now 18 years old, you should be ready to go do the hard work. Because up to that point, it should not be hard. It's going to be hard work, but it shouldn't be the point where the athletes are just completely ground out. Chris, you and I have spoken about this off the record. How many people do you know, factory team, or was on a factory team coming out of amateur ranks, ironically diagnosed with Epstein-Barr? So then they lose their factory ride, then they go to a plan B, then they go to plan C, and then they are now the new trainer at your local facility. It's the craziest cycle I've ever seen.
Yeah, we have the weirdest education system for our trainers, and nobody has a real background or understands physiology. And the parents that jump in and all of a sudden become experts, these fat parents who get out there and think they know how to turn your kid into a pro because their kid was a pro. They know a little about a little. They do not know every little basic. Like, would you trust them to be your mechanic just because they were someone's parent? No. Then why would you trust them with physiology and for these like facilities to let them come in and welcome them just because of the name? I'm sorry. I know you probably don't want to say anything about the Lawrences, but hearing a former drag racer and the Lawrence dad, Dazzy, acting like he's teaching Team Honda how to set up motorcycles. I don't know if you heard the interview I did with Jason Thomas. Mm-hmm. That was Hunter Lawrence that they were talking about when they said, oh, we only want to use the first 3 inches of the stroke and that's it. And if you go back and look at Hangtown in 2019, which that's when I'm pretty sure this happened. Jason didn't tell me this. He gave me the clues and I went and found it. Pretty sure that bike looked like a chopper and he crashed and beat himself up. And it just blows me away, the lack of accountability for trainers and parents with this fake advice just because somebody was good.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you're seeing it in today's, when you mention that name, we can watch them on TV on Saturday. The thing that, if I may run with your thread of thought for just a moment, here's the part that blows my mind. And I say this as respectfully as I can for any parent listening to this. When was the last time you asked your facility or facility trainer, or in my wheelhouse, the human performance side? Like, I'm not going to argue with you whether you should stand up or sit down in a rut. That's between you and Ryan Sipes. That's between you and Ben Riddle. That's between you and the best riding coaches in the world. Buddy Antunez. There's a ton of really good riding coaches that are out there. I'm not overstepping my bounds. I'm staying in my lane. But if Buddy Antunez or Billy Laninovich comes up to me and they say, hey, let's say they're talking to my rider, Bronx Grundy. If they're talking to Bronx and Bronx can't stay standing up, or Bronx can't keep his inner leg up high enough out of the rut that Buddy Antunez is asking, right? Then that's my responsibility to make sure that the strength and flexibility of Bronx Grundy can do what Buddy Antunez is asking. Pretty simple. It makes sense. But when a parent goes and allows somebody to make a demand, hey, in the gym, this is what I want you to do. Balls to the wall on the Concept 2 rower, heavy lifting, high intensity interval training, like CrossFit type training. And the parent doesn't ask why. It blows my mind, because now you have an athlete that's going into the gym doing it in blind faith. But yet, if the parents were to ask, hey, show me the success that you've had with somebody else with this methodology. This is the questions that I get, and I love it. And I don't want that to come across arrogantly. At the time of this recording, I have 4 AMA #1 pro plates, and I have 318 #1 amateur titles. Okay. So if somebody says, who have you worked with? I can give you names of people. What about the results that you got with those people? I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some of the best in the business, starting at a very young age. I don't ever take that lightly, but here's where it becomes a catch-22, and I'm going to use a completely different discipline. In our general fitness weight loss division, I had a soccer mom of 3, literally, who said, what do you know about women's weight loss? And I said, well, she said, who'd you work with? Keyword, right, Chris? Who'd you work with?
Yes.
At the time, we were working with the model of Bowflex, and she was also she was a cover model for Runner's World magazine. And she said, oh, you only work with models. I said, no, ma'am, you asked me who we worked with relevant to women's health and fitness, particularly for body sculpting. And she says, well, you must not be able to work with soccer moms. I said, ma'am, The physiology for a soccer mom is the same as the physiology for a model. But the problem that we run into is if any of the parents listening to this asks their so-called trainer why we're doing it, they get ostracized. Don't you ever question why we're doing something. Why not? Do you not question everybody else in your world? Do you not question your banker? I hope so. Do you not question anybody that works on your car? I mean, you go and you get an estimate for something to be done on your car. Let's say you go to get the AC fixed on it. They say it's going to be $4,000. You don't go, why? They're going to replace a compressor. They're going to replace this. But if they give you a reason why they're doing it, you go, okay, it justifies the expense. I would challenge any parent. My heart bleeds when I have a 17-year-old that's tired and a parent that didn't feel like they could ask the questions. And if they did, they got ostracized. Chris, it's even gotten so bad that I've had a parent coming from another country who was going to work at a new, the athlete from another country was coming to the States to work at a facility. They asked a question about the program and they said, if you question this program again, you will not be allowed to train here.
That is insane. That is insanity, coach.
Who's the customer? Like, I can't imagine in any other business, the one who's paying the money to the facility. Now I understand these parents are stuck. They need a facility. They need a prep facility. They need a facility that's under the tutelage of like a JP Money at Next Level, whether it's Daniel Blair at Club MX, like I said, Ben Riddle at Sandbox. You can go through all kinds of different facilities, right? If you go and you ask those riding coaches, they'll tell you every reason why we're doing what we're doing. And that's what I find so fascinating. If you, a paying parent, I know you need a facility, you're being told, don't ask questions because you're challenging me. I'm like, wow, how did we get here? I have seen that at a pro level. When an athlete signs a factory contract, I have seen it very verbatim where the parents are pushed aside. The parents are told they can't come onto property. They don't want the parents around. Now, that's obviously a very volatile subject because we do know there's some rogue parents and we understand that those are hard to deal with, right? So I understand where the OEMs are coming from, the team managers. But when you have a child that's not even 18 years old yet and your parents essentially being told, stay at the gate, you can't come in, why would you do that? What is it that you're afraid that the parent's going to hear? I mean, think about James Stewart, right? Big James, we know that he's not afraid to speak his mind, but look at how J-Bone was able to work with him. It wasn't like James Sr. was told, you got to stay at the gate. No, J-Bone worked with James Sr. and they made things work. Kawasaki, they had tremendous success together. But to think, and this is, Chris, where it blows my mind, we're not talking about pros being separated from their parents. We've got parents that are being intimidated by facilities saying, look, if you even so much as question us, you're going to get kicked to the curb. And this goes back to where there's a lack of accountability, because unfortunately, a lot of these facilities have a waiting list, right? People want to ride where everybody else rides. It's the flavor of the month. And you could go through all the different facilities that were at one point in time considered the be all end all. We'll use Matt Walker since he's out of business as a facility, right? But there was a time when everybody thought Matt Walker's MX compound was it. He got a couple championships. But I could also give you 25 other facilities that have had championships, and then that's the flavor of the month for the next year. And then it's the next facility. And it's, look, facilities, if they prep the track and they run it on time and you've got good riding coaches when it comes to what to do on the track, and then you complement that with a program where the rider's not getting overworked off the track, he still has to do some work. Nutrition, sleep, believe it or not, is considered work. But if you're not tracking that, and then you're just being told, suck it up, buttercup. Chris, we grew up in a no pain, no gain, right?
Yeah.
But I laugh at, I say this to Derek Harris with HP Development all the time. It's like you having 100 hours on your motor. You see the hour meter and you just start calling them bike names. Come on, you pansy, let's go, push through, right? When you look at it in mechanical terms, it seems completely foolish to think, well, the bike's tired. All right. Well, when your athlete's got an elevated heart rate, suppressed appetite, can't sleep when he's exhausted, HRV's out of balance, like how many more red lights do you need in the room? And then, so what did they say? Well, you're obviously not as tough as this guy because this guy can push through. Well, that's ridiculous. Remember what we said? I've got athletes that do 40 hours and aren't tired. And I've got an MXGP rider that's calling me saying he's tired doing 9 hours a week. It doesn't add up.
Coach, and that's what's so crazy. And I know you've gotten a lot of blowback from like facilities because you bring an educated background and you can tell them the why. And they're scared of that. Why are they scared of actually having the proper information? Is it because they're afraid of being exposed? What do you think that is?
It's so funny you bring this up because I swear it comes up in our staff meeting every single week. I don't have an answer to that question because, and I'll be very transparent to anybody who's listening to this. If you own a facility, our company's desire is to be a positive cash flow for your facility. If you're a riding coach, we have a coaching affiliate program. So if Chris Cooksey hires me, we give, let's say Chris is working with Buddy Antonez. If Buddy Antonez refers Chris and his son to me, we give a referral fee every single month that that athlete is with us back to Buddy Antonez, because Buddy Antonez's reputation is priceless to me. If I can earn the trust of Buddy Antonez that I'm going to help his athletes be ready to do whatever he asks, that's the least I can do to serve Buddy and to serve the parents and do the right thing for the rider. I'm trying to spread the wealth because I appreciate Buddy's put confidence in me, but I feel like I owe him because he's Buddy Antonez. Was he 6-time arena cross champion? He's been there, done that. I have a responsibility to make sure that when he works with Bronx Grundy, that no matter what Buddy asks, he can do it for as long as Buddy asks, and he does it, and Bronx can recover from it. When it comes back to the idea why the facilities are intimidated, I don't know. I'm a positive cash flow for the facility and the riding coach. I'm trying to protect the longevity of the athlete. And this is where I call it the big peacock. I guess I could say it on your show. It's the big penis swinging contest, right? It's a big dick swinging contest. And I don't understand it. I'm not here to be a threat to anybody. And I'm going to say it for the third time. I'm not going to argue whether you're going to stand up or sit down in a rut. I'm not going to argue if you have 1 or 2 fingers on the front brake. That's not my lane. But I will make sure that you don't disrupt the balance of a motorcycle by lifting incorrectly in the gym, throwing off the 3 dimensions of movement on a motorcycle. Think about the motorcycle, Chris. You have above and below the seat. You have the left and the right peg and what's going on in front and behind the pegs. It matches human movement. You have a left and a right leg above and below the belly button, the front and the backside. But then you go in the gym and you lift completely contrary to what it takes to ride a motorcycle. So this is what I find interesting as a parent will not question why they're doing what they're doing in the gym, because if they do, they're for fear of getting kicked out. Then you have their son or daughter that they're spending bukus of money on to be at these facilities. And then 5 years later, they're smoked. And then everyone's looking at each other going, what the hell just happened? That's where I just stand back to your point. Why am I perceived as a threat? It's been the $1 million question. I'm going to show my age here. 40 years of doing this. And the ones and I love Ronnie Tishner. I'm forever thankful for him. And I'll be very transparent. I was able to pick up Adam C., Ashley Fialik, Ian Treadle, Zach Freeberg, John Ames, Zach Commons, all came from the opportunity to work with Ronnie Tishner.
Wow.
And I'm forever thankful for that.
Let me go a different direction here, Coach. So a lot of the detractors and these people, and we kind of know who they are, they come at you and they say, oh, they all left you. Why did you had all these great riders, but they left. Why is that, Coach?
I can sum it up in pretty much 2 different areas. Before we even get into this subject, it's funny you bring this up. This is an interesting subject because I'm not jaded at all. I love my job. I love every person that I've ever worked with. We also have to realize that there's a moving landscape. If we take somebody like an Adam C., I had him when he was on 85s. He was riding for Mitch. And Alan, the dad, and Christy, the mom, wonderful people. Adam is a great guy to work with. I've said it publicly. He's probably one of the hardest workers I've ever worked with. When I was working with AC, all of a sudden I get a phone call from Alan and he's like, hey, we've got to go to dinner. It's like, what's up? We go to dinner. He's like, Mitch is pulling him up to the factory team. I think we were 14 at the time, very small. And I was like, wow. And he said, we love we love working with you, but we have to move over to the trainer that Villapoto is working with. They're currently renting Grant Langston's place. You guys now know it as Sandbox. And he said, look, Mitch wants us to ride with Villapoto. We've got a facility. I said, I get it. You got to do what you got to do for Adam. So I lost Adam because he got pulled to the factory rig. Jordan Bailey, I had him as he was developing. He signed a 2-year deal with Husky. He had to go follow the Husky program. So that's just the moving landscape, right? If I have an athlete that's getting developed and they get pulled over to Star, they're going to be working with Swanepoel. If they're under the Husky program or the KTM Pierre Mobility Group, it's an Alden program. That's cool. I get it. That's a package deal. When you sign, you have to go there. I get left behind. It's no big deal. It's not the first time and it won't be the last time. In regards to why we end up parting ways with people, a lot of times is because I'll pick up an athlete, and I don't want this to sound disrespectful, but I'll pick up an athlete essentially that's I'm getting sloppy seconds, right? The athlete's exhausted. The athlete's craving simple sugars. The athlete can't sleep. Well, my job isn't to bust that athlete's balls. They've already been busted hard enough. They need recovery. So I, in a non-emotional way, show the athlete, hey, I'm not calling you soft, but when we look at your blood work, you've got all these mineral deficiencies. You've even got the Epstein-Barr virus in your blood. So what I have to do is get that stress out of your system. Now think about it. If I'm getting hired by somebody that's a pro at the same time that I'm trying to get them out from underneath fatigue and they're on the tail end of a 2-year deal, what kind of a dichotomy does that put the athlete into? If the athlete doesn't hear what they want to hear, they're paying me, so I get kicked to the curb. Anybody who's listening to this, you understand.
Yeah.
When you're the one writing the check, at some point, you'll work with the system for a while, but at the end of the day, if you're not getting told what you want to hear, you'll move on. That's okay. And in 100% transparency, my pro contracts are month to month, just as my amateur programs are, because I don't want you to ever feel like you've bought into something and have buyer's remorse. But I also want an out, just like you have an out. If you're not willing to do the work, I've got a waiting list of people, and I work with 865s all the way up to vet riders and even pro riders, right? But the interesting part is, like, the pro riders that we work with, we can't advertise it because they're paying us. So think about that. Like, a parent will ask you who to work with. Why can't, for liability purposes, I can't say who I'm working with because I don't have the legal right to say I'm working with rider XYZ. You might see him on Saturday, but I can't tell you that. Now, that's not to try to keep anything secret. If that rider goes out and says that they're working with me, that's their prerogative. That's their legal right. I can't do it. See the problem that you run into?
Yes, I do. And then you had a really high profile split with Ryan Dungey. What happened there?
That was a mixture of somebody got in his ear. And when I first picked up Ryan, he was dealing with a lot of fatigue related issues. He had just left Suzuki, gone to KTM. We had some fatigue related issues. I'm not sharing anything that's not already public knowledge. And we just spent the first 3-4 months just trying to get him out from underneath that. So people got in his ear, and we were racing against Villopoto. Villopoto has been on the Cowie for 2 or 3 years, obviously fast as lightning. We just left Suzuki, a bike that turns on a dime, to a KTM platform that hadn't been proven yet. I always say the wheels were in different zip codes, right? I mean, just a very long wheelbase.
Let me just remind people, when Dungey went to KTM, they didn't have a linkage. Like, it was, they were the fifth factory. They were a joke. Well, you went to KTM when you ended your career.
Well, how many people said that publicly, right? This is the worst move Dunge could ever do. They'd never even won a race. I think David Pingery had won a main event with KTM, if I'm not mistaken. But, the long and the short of it is, when I picked up Ryan, new platform, new team, still working with Roger, thank goodness. But Ryan was tired, and we just worked on trying to get him out from underneath that. And there are some people that got in his ears and said, the reason why you're getting beat by Villopoto is because he's beating you on the first 2 laps. So you need to do more sprint work. Well, when you're dealing with a human body that's struggling with fatigue, you can't do speed work. We have to save that for the weekend. You're making small deposits every day, and then you go and you empty the bank on Saturday, and then that was the best that we could do. And that's in 100% transparency. Ryan was, and everybody knows Ryan, he's the most dedicated worker. If you ask that guy to stand on his head, sing Kumbaya, and rub his belly on Wednesdays at 3, you'd get it from Ryan. He's the hardest worker, the nicest guy. Him and Lindsay, the whole Dungey family is great. I love Jade. The whole family is fantastic. But when somebody puts a shadow of doubt in your ear, and as soon as I say to the listener, don't think about a pink cow with black spots, where does your brain go? So when you're being told you need to do more sprint work and what you're doing is not working, well, I was trying to play the big game of getting Ryan ready to go outdoors, because Supercross is nowhere as physically demanding as an outdoor, 230s with a 1-hour break. 230s plus 2 with a 1-hour break, it's in the heat and humidity, is a completely different animal. So like I said to Ryan, we have to get you through Supercross if we're going to try to survive outdoors. And then he had some people get in his ears and said, look, you're getting your ass handed to you by Villopoto because your sprint speed isn't there. And so as soon as that shadow of doubt was put there, I knew that my days were numbered. And then at that point, Villopoto had parted ways with his trainer. And then that's when Ryan decided to go that route, which I completely understand. Like I said, I will never keep somebody from making decisions in their program, but I just can't be a part of all of those decisions. And when he decided to go to Alden, it made all the sense in the world. And this is another example of I try to talk to Ryan on a regular basis. Wonderful person, love him to death. But, he had to make the decisions that were necessary for his career. And, a lot of people would look at it. It was the right decision, and he was able to go the distance. I've always enjoyed working with Ryan, a great person all the way around. And I was glad to see him be as successful as he was.
Well, that's the way that you handle these pros, these kids coming up, to where if they do get on a team or an opportunity, you will never hold them back or say, oh, you got to take me with you. I don't understand why facilities or teams would ever be scared of you. And I get it. You're a smart dude. And I'm not going to lie. If I was a trainer and I talked to you, I would feel like this big. Just because, not because you're arrogant or anything, but you know so much, and you have an answer, a logical, scientific answer for everything. So, I mean, I kind of understand why they're scared of you, but the fact that you let guys go where they need to go, why wouldn't you? Well, there's no downside. And then these trainers, people, and let me reiterate, that referral fee that you give, that is not just a finder's fee. That is a monthly, every single time. As long as this person's with you, you still get the referral fee. So why wouldn't you? I don't understand it. It blows my mind, Coach.
Well, the challenge that I run into is, think about it, for the listeners, any team that you think of, you probably can associate a trainer with it. And it's a catch-22, because yes, I would love to work for Dustin Pipes at HEP, or I shouldn't say work for him. I'd like to work with him. I'd love to work with Mitch Payton, right? And I've talked to Mitch, not personally.
Coach, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. These people want you to work for them, not with them.
Well, and this is where, and I don't want this to come across as a crass comment, but just think about the bro network. When I say the bro network, all the listeners are going to be able to resonate with that. So for me, I'm not interested in being somebody's man friend. And I'm not saying that the current trainers are man friends, but what I'm saying is, to get into that network, you got to play the bro network. I'm never going to be that. I'm never going to be paid to sit and hold a pit board. I'm not going to be somebody's cheerleader. I'm here to look at analytics. I'm here to build a human body that is both durable and one that's sustainable. Now, some people can roll their eyes and say that's a textbook comment, but that's what we live and die by. I have a responsibility to you as an individual. 65, vet rider, pro rider, that's my responsibility. But you've got to remember that if a team has a trainer and the trainer is not being vetted out by the owner, what I was going to say with Mitch Payton is, and Mitch has been very vocal about, look, I've got millions of dollars tied up in a truck and a ton of staff, bikes. Why should I have to pay to get an athlete to be fit enough to come and do their job? I get it. But then on the flip side of that, and this is not a dig against Mitch. That was what I've heard Mitch say, and I totally understand it. But then on the flip side of that, I look at it as, if I'm a football team owner, I want to make sure that my athletes are getting the best, are giving the team the best that they have to offer, because the team is giving them the best equipment. Let's go back to moto. Mitch is giving everything that he can in the way of bikes, getting the transporters there, the best staff, the best technicians. Now, all of a sudden, it's like the rider, he needs to be able to give exactly what Mitch is giving. And when you put those two together, like, for example, and again, I don't mind being very transparent. Why are trainers not getting paid exclusively on performance? This is why I do my pro contracts, right? For me to come out and ask for a 6-figure salary because I'm me, I have no skin in the game. I get my money, and if I ruin that athlete, there's no accountability. You see where this is a double-edged sword? I can roach the rider. I have no what are they going to do? Come after me? Now, we do an agreement. If we smoke your adrenals, I'll give you your money back. You don't have to ask. I'll give it to you. I think that's the responsible thing to do. If I work for a team, I don't want a salary. I want to be performance-based only. So now I'm working with the team on getting results. Show me one trainer that works for a team that's doing it on results basis only. Now, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but if I was a team owner, that's what I'd be asking.
And what's crazy, Coach, is I think because you're so logical, it's just, and you're the only guy that will go month to month, you become expendable, and then they hire these guys on 3-year contracts with big money, and then those guys, they don't have the knowledge you have, so then I think they take shots at you.
Well, and I hope Lucas doesn't get mad at me for saying this, but this is what I like about talking to agents, right? If I can say to an agent like a Lucas Myrtle and say, hey, look, I've got Chase DeShiel. He's on an 85, top 5, top 8 guy, and this is the trajectory we're on. We're on the long game. It doesn't do me any, this is going to sound really awkward. It doesn't do me any immediate, I'm going to contradict myself. If Chase DeShiel goes and he wins Loretta's this year, sure, he's going to thank us on the podium, and our marketing department can put some things out there, and people are going to notice, okay, we're working with Chase DeShiel. We have for 5 years. We won Super Mini Class. Awesome. That's not the game we're playing. We're playing A1 in 2027, 2028, whatever the year may be based on his age, right? That's the part that's hard for us. Like, one of the things that we want to roll out, I would be very curious to see what the listeners have to think about this. Chris Cooksey comes to me and he's got a 12-year-old son, 10-year-old son. Chris thinks that his son's got the talent. Okay, cool. Sign this contract. Give me a 5-year, give me a 10-year. Let's start with 5. I'd like to get 10. Give me a 5-year contract, sign this dotted line. And if you get through the next 5 years and you go pro, when you get your pro card, I will write you a check for every dollar you've ever given me. So essentially, I will write you sign this contract, I will write you, let's just say it's $100,000 for even numbers. So I go to Chase DeShiel and I'm like, sign this contract. And at the end of this contract, when you go pro, if you don't have Epstein-Barr in your body, if you have 0 setbacks, like significant ones, the race has its own challenges, but it's not like you have patella tendonitis and you have all these. If you get all the way to that point, I will give you 100% of your money back.
If you're not ready to go at your strongest, this is what you're saying.
Nope, the opposite. Because now I have an obligation to prove to you that I can get you to that pro ranks. That's my motivation. And I'm willing to pay to me, if you want to reverse it, it's like marketing. If I can show that Chase DeShiel from 12 to 18 years old is able to get there, and now he can, like we said, the race begins. Now the work can begin. It's like, I will write you a contract that says, I'll guarantee you $100,000 because I'm going to give you every dollar back that you ever paid me. It doesn't equate to 100,000. I'm using it as an example. What I need out of it is I need the commitment that you're going to get your blood work done every quarter. That way we know that your blood's in balance and we have no fatigue related issues. You have to send me your testing results every 6 weeks. You have to send me your body measurements. You have to train with a heart rate monitor. You have to weigh in twice a day. Now, some people think stepping on a scale is difficult, but I'm saying if you're willing to do it every day for the next 7 years, when you go pro, I'll give you every dollar back. Why? Because now I've been able to use this example to go talk to a Mitch Payton and go talk to a Lucas Myrtle. I'm going to hand you an athlete that I can look Lucas Myrtle in the eye and say, you see these results? They're not fabricated. It's fact. And when Lucas Myrtle sits across a desk and he gets a rider to swing a leg over a bike, that rider is ready for the race, because the race begins at 18 and it goes until you're 30. But the problem is they get to 18 and they're already smoked. What are we seeing? We're seeing kids through the amateur ranks that just fizzle as soon as they go pro.
Our sport has a list of them. And I'm like, Chet Reynolds is probably one of the worst. Like, he was the best talent that showed up the most burnout, and Seth, when he left your program, where they sent him, burnt him to the ground. And it's brutal. But the fact that you're willing to be accountable, and you've been working on this for a long time, ever since I've met you, you've been talking about this and you've been collecting data. I don't understand. Like, if you really do want to be a pro and think you have the talent, why wouldn't they sign up with you? Because you're going to get them to the pros at the healthiest as possible. The problem I think sometimes where you run into is sometimes you're not peaking these guys in the amateurs. They get fifth. Some kid wins who they're burning out. And, you'll pass them down the road. But if they've only given you a few years and then they panic and jump off board.
That's the key word right there, is panic. Like we were saying earlier, if somebody, let's say that you've got a son, and unfortunately we had this happen in the amateur ranks. We had a young man that we took from 65s up to the 250B class. And on the ascent, everything was great. Parents loved the program. The rider was super confident. Then he signed with an agent, and then the agent started using some fear tactics that if you don't do what I tell you as an agent, then unfortunately it's going to hurt your chances of getting a factory ride. That's what I was saying a little bit earlier in regards to between the mind fuck that you get from facilities, not all of them, but the manipulation. If you're not going to do it our way, then you're kicked to the curb. You sign with an agent, they use a little bit of a fear factor. If you don't do what I hate to say it, but they're like, I know better than you do. I've got the phone numbers to the right people. So I'm going to have you change programs and go over here. Well, put yourself in my position. I work with an athlete for 7 years, and then I've got an agent that tells the parents, you need to change programs. Even though we've had tremendous success, we pick up 11 amateur titles together, right? Now, all of a sudden, that's not good enough. And now the parent, think about it. Are you, Chris, you have a very successful son. You have an agent that's saying you need to pivot and go over here. And if you don't, this opportunity is going to elude you. Are you going to stick with me or go with the agent? Because you're following the money. You're thinking, because I'm not plugged in with that. I'm not negotiating deals, but an agent is. So now the agent ends up fucking the family because now they've moved them and pivoted them, which then squanders 8. And then a year later, the athlete's out of the sport. And then what am I supposed to do? Pick up the phone and say, I told you so? I would never do it. I would never do it. But this is where my heart bleeds because the parents have gotten duped into something. And I don't mean to keep bringing up Lucas Myrtle, but that is an agent that everybody can relate to. There's great agents out there, the Jimmy Buttons and all of those guys are good. The problem is I can't get a one-on-one with Jimmy. I can't spend 5 years with Jimmy to show him what we've done. So that's why I want to say, okay, Chase DeShiel, Soren, those are our 2 85 riders on our factory team. Bronx Grundy, we have some great riders on our elite team. You start putting all that together, I'm like, okay, I will put my neck on the line. I will fund it. Because then as soon as I get a half a dozen of those, and then I hand that off to Lucas, and then he goes and he gets a contract, and then we go and we stamp it, you're talking a 15, 20-year process. But I've got to start somewhere. That's why I started my elite team 13 years ago. When you look at the amount of championships that have come out of it, all I can do is use that as a track record, because without having that success, and it goes back to the lady that said, oh, you only work with models. No, we work with 65 riders because the physiology is the same on a 65, an 85, a 125, a 250, and a pro or a vet. It's all the same. But this is where people's egos get in. Well, I'm so-and-so, and I was in a factory rig, or I was, I made the night show twice in my career. So listen to me. And I'm like, hey man, see these 415 250F model, mechanics manuals that I have? Doesn't make me a professional. I've got them, but it doesn't make me a professional. Just because you got dressed in a rig does not make you a physiologist. And again, for me, I'm not into the big dick swinging contest as much as I am. If you ask me what our credentials are, I've got credentials. If you ask me what our results are, I've got results. Now, take my face off the shoulders, just compare that to who you're working with. And if you're not able to get the same results, if you can't get the same methodology, if you can't get an explanation on the why, again, I'm not saying you have to hire me. There's a Charles Deo out there. There's Coach CG. There's some of the best guys in the world. Get somebody who's got the credentials. Doesn't have to be me. Just like good motor builders, Derek Harris says this all the time. Derek's like, look, suspension's a real booger. Find somebody local that can work with you at the track. Like Derek says all the time. In my opinion, Derek's one of the smartest men in the sport when it comes to motors and suspension. And Derek says it all the time. Find somebody local, because you need somebody local to help you set up your bike. He's not saying, come to me. That's not what we're saying. It's when I talk to parents that are devastated that their son is now burnt out mentally and physically right when they should be hitting the catapult button. Instead, they're resigning from the sport or doing a public announcement that they're leaving the sport completely. And you're just like, man. And then, Chris, you said it earlier. I say this to my wife every Saturday night. We'll look at particularly the LCQ, go down that list. And I say to Michaela, see that name? That was the dude at Loretta's in 2024. You see that dude? That guy was the guy in 2023. And they're in the LCQ and they're in 19th place. That should never happen. And the reason why I say that, Chris, so adamantly is the people that are in front of them were people that they were beating at the amateur level. That should not happen. If you're dominating, and Daniel Blair and I talk about this all the time, Derek Harris has actually got it down to a numerical science. When you look at the percentage of where people finish at the amateur ranks, and if you look at that class over class, year over year, and then when they go pro, there is a trajectory that should fall into place. And when we see there being a regression, that's when I'm like, how is that happening? And I call it the B class curse. So I'll work with an athlete from 65s. They love the program. Everything is going well, but now they're really good. Now they're too cool for school. They're arrogant little pricks. And I hate to say it, but I could literally give you 100 people that we worked with and got them to where they're at. And then they're like, no, I've heard it before. I know everything. I've got this. I'm like, dude, it's only beginning. So I just shake my head because I understand, right? Your son or daughter is now 17 or 18. And what do the parents always tell me? We have to let him make his own decisions. I'm like, yeah, how's that working out for you now?
Yes,
Not about
no.
me, not about me, just the idea that your athlete's projection was this, and now it's doing this because you let them make their own decision. I don't have anything for you on that one, man. Sorry.
Yeah. So you turn to an uneducated former racer to do your body physiology at the highest level. And I'm not saying a lot of those guys that are the former racers, they're great coaches. They're great riding coaches. They're great mental with the race game. But when it comes to body physiology, all they know is what they did. So they don't really know it from a scientific standpoint where you bring it from why and how and what this does specifically. It's crazy to me that that happens, but
I always look at it as if you ask anybody, call them a trainer generically, if they can't answer the why behind it, then you shouldn't do it. I tell my athletes that every day. If you start a workout on or off the motorcycle and you don't understand that workout's purpose for the day, the week, that training block, and how it fits into your race schedule for the year, then I have failed you as a physiologist, as a parent and a rider. Now, again, I'm not saying you have to have a master's level degree on why we're doing it, but you have to have a general understanding, because at the end of the day, how do we measure confidence? It's not a measurable, it's not like there's a dipstick in your chest that I can measure your confidence. So how do I build your confidence as a parent in your athlete's program? How do I build your confidence as a racer when you put that helmet on? And that's with results. If you see your strength weight ratios are going up, if you see you're faster at a lower heart rate, all of these just simple measurements. Now, again, if you want to ask me, why am I faster at a lower heart rate? We get into cardiac output and we get into millimole readings and VO2 max and all. Sure, I'll get into the weeds on the nitty gritty on physiology. But when somebody hires Mitch Payton, somebody hires Derek Harris, somebody hires Ziggy, you're not arguing about how the motor or the suspension is configured. You're saying, can you build me a motor? What is it spec to do? It's going to come on hard, pull long. What's it going to do? And then you purchase it and then you race it based on that. Okay, well, that's my job. If you tell me that you're training for 2:30s plus 2 with a 1 hour break, are we looking at doing that in 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years? What are we working with? And, take something like Loretta's in nutrition. I probably get 100, 250 phone calls literally 2 weeks before Loretta's. Hey, can you put together a nutrition program for my little Johnny?
yeah, for 2 weeks.
But I can't, because I don't know their sweat rate. I don't know their sensitivities to food. There's so many elements that go in. Our athletes are figuring it out as the temperature rises. We call them temperature silos. My athletes know their sweat rate at 80 to 85 degrees, 85 to 90 degrees, 95 to 100. And the idea is duration, intensity, heart rate, air temperature, and humidity. That's my job to figure it out. I calculate it. I give it to you. Now my athlete, that's one thing he or she doesn't have to worry about when we go to Loretta's. We're worried about, we have 10 laps. We need to polish the start. We need to stay out of trouble. We need to negative split the race. Because guess what? Mile 20 of a marathon, the race begins at Loretta's. The race begins at lap 6. Doesn't give a shit. You get no awards for the first 6 laps. You don't get any awards for 9 laps. You only get awards for the 10th lap. So that's where I love this conversation. These questions that you brought up are pretty intriguing, because yeah, it's my sandbox. I love it. And when you get a parent, I've got some very educated parents, some very athletic parents. Those guys are fantastic, because I can get a little bit into the weeds with those guys, because they can relate when they were downhill skiers, or they were a triathlete, or they were a cyclist, or even a motocrosser. How many times have I heard, well, I'll give a very specific example. We're fortunate enough to do some work. I'm not going to say his name, because I'm not sure that he wants anybody to know that we're working together, but an ex-pro that we're working with their son, and the dad says all the time, damn, if I'd had this when I was pro, it would be a game changer, because, I was doing it the exact opposite. He thought he had to grind out the duration of the moto, or if the race weekend was 30 minutes, he was grinding 30s every day, and then running 10 miles, because that's what his riding coach told him that's what they used to do when they were working with, factory XYZ. So our goal is to try to hedge it off and bring some knowledge into it, and, not have those 17-year-olds that are exhausted and not able to catapult when it's time to go, so it's a lot of fun.
Good stuff, Coach. I think I've kept you longer than we had planned, but that always happens.
No worries.
With us. Hey, let me finish up with one question. We hear your boy J Mart. You're tight with Jeremy Martin. Were you surprised to see that he's coming back for the outdoors? And I know the deal's for the first 3, but I guess if he does good in those first 3, they're going to run it all year. What do you think of the J Mart comeback?
I love it and I hate it all at the same time. Because when I talked to him, the reason why he was pulling the plug was because of the concussions. So it, if you go back to somebody like Sean Hackley, he had so many concussions that, like the doctor told him, if you hit your head one more time, you may not wake up. And that's not hearsay. That's what they told Sean Hackley. I had the privilege of working with Sean, ironically, with the Toyota Moving Forward program, another great riding coach. Yeah, I'm kind of split on it because I love seeing J Mart. I mean, he's just a pit bull in a fight. I love the Martin brothers, watching them ride, with their height. They're already at a disadvantage. Reminds me a lot of Wardy. But they're pit bulls. I love them. They're very determined. But I also hate to see him out there because I hope that he doesn't end up getting hurt. I just love him as an individual. But then again, it's great to see J Mart out there. So how many riders does that make for Star starting outdoors? Like, who's he filling in for?
I think he's filling in for Pierce.
Okay, that makes sense.
Pierce is out and one other guy's out. But Star, they're not afraid to put more under the tent.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Pierce's injuries are going to keep him from coming back from outdoors as well. So are they thinking that he won't be back for outdoors at all, Pierce?
I don't think so. It was far worse than the press release. I have a source pretty close to the family. And I'm just, honestly, at this point, the injury that he had, I'm just thankful that he's walking and going to make a full recovery. Racing, to me right now, is secondary for Pierce. I would love to see him get back out there, but I really want to see him live a full and complete life before he goes back out there. I hope he doesn't hurry and rush it, because I mean that's no joke, man. And what even makes me more mad is they blame the whoops at the end of the straightaway, not the tough block that he hit.
Yeah, exactly. And you've shown it in slow motion numerous times. I mean, it's pretty clear. He's on the right side of the track because obviously that's where the hot line was. And it wasn't like he drifted off the track. Yeah. I mean, you could say he caught his foot, but they don't need to be that close. They don't even need to be on the track at all. But yeah, it's a shame. And it's funny you bring that up about, the media not telling the truth. And we understand a lot of times that's because the teams don't want it. But, man, we've had some athletes that got hurt last year that, pretty much, I'll just go so far as to say literally life-threatening. And, you're on the tail end of a second-year deal, or maybe you only got a one-year deal. And it puts you, like you say, with Pierce. I mean, yeah, it's one thing to say we hope he doesn't rush back, but heck, if he doesn't get an extension of his contract, and this is another conversation that we could talk about on another day, but it's hard when these kids, especially when it's a bike mechanical issue that wads the rider up. And that seems to be the theme this year. I'm quite surprised how many factory riders have gotten hurt because of mechanical malfunctions. And again, I know in our sport, there's a lot of cover up. They don't want to, he has a couple of broken ribs and instead he's got internal bleeding and damn near died and had 7 blood transfusions. Like you always say, I don't know why we try to mask it. We all know it's dangerous as heck. Just like I don't understand how anybody can sue a track. Nobody makes us put our helmet on. Nobody makes us swing a leg over. Yeah, I'm sorry that you went over. Remember when we were at Western together and that guy was talking all kinds of shit, and then second lap in, he goes over the edge of the berm and the berm's 4 feet up, and remember, he ended up going to the hospital.
Yeah.
How do you blame the track when we sat and told you? At any rate, I just don't think that. I think there should be one piece of paper that exonerates a track from anybody suing them. Now, again, if they say the track's open and you come up an uphill double and there's a dozer going across track, that's negligence. I understand that. But for these tracks where people are saying I got hurt because I went down in a corner, and how? I'm not going to mention the track, but we have a relationship with a facility in Europe, and there were 5 kids, teenagers. They were doing what they called I'll call it an energy drink. I'm not going to call out what the company was, but it was one of the energy drinks. It was drink a can of the energy drink, rip a lap, drink. And the kid got to the, I think, 6th or 7th can, gets flying around the first turn, dies of a heart attack, sues the track and wins.
How's that the track's fault?
Now, you and I can say that, but how's it McDonald's fault that the coffee's hot? How is it Zeb Armstrong's fault that somebody tips over, or goes over a berm or whatever, these different frivolous lawsuits? Why is it anyone's fault who owns Paris or anybody else, right? It's like, how is that a track's fault that the bike tipped over and you broke your collarbone or you went over the berm or whatever? So when you bring it full circle, it's just, it's a shame that we have these mechanicals, and then you have riders that are maybe like Plessinger just got a 1-year extension. I thought that was kind of interesting. I was hoping he'd get a 2-year deal, but he only got a 1 year, and I'm sure he's thankful for that. But think about how kind of almost mind warped that one itself is. Be thankful that you got a 1-year deal. So essentially, we just threw you a couple crumbs. It's like there's no, why not give them a 10-year deal? Why not build some security? It's just that's another component. Like I've got some investors that have approached me about building a team, and for us, we were looking at doing a 5-year deal because then the parents, it's like the kids can focus on learning how to balance a bike and ride a bike, and even like when Jet was saying, we're no longer working on setup, we're actually training on the bike now. That was significant when when they first went outdoors and it just wasn't working very well. And Jet said, we finally are at a point where we're not working on setup during the week. We're training. I think that's a significant comment. Same thing like with setting up a bike. If we're going to bring somebody on, it's a 5-year deal. We want to do a 250 and a 450, and we want to have a backup rider for both. So I've got 250 riders and 450 riders. The one that's the backup rider gets paid 50% of the salary. So think about it. If Chris is our A guy and we're paying him $100,000 a year, if he gets hurt, Chris becomes the B guy. He gets paid $50,000 a year. The $50,000 goes to $100,000. But we have 4 riders with guaranteed income. And for the sponsors that sponsor our team, guess what? When we move that rider up, because he's a B rider, when we move him up because Chris got hurt, he's already familiar with the bike. We're not wasting 5 races to get him used to the bike. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I understand it's expensive, but why not work it into the budget up front? Because the sponsors want exposure. We want riders to have security. This is just not rocket science, in my opinion.
When it goes back to if the promoters shared some of that revenue from the streaming deal, then these teams would have more money. They'd have more opportunities to do this stuff, and they could think outside the box a little bit more. And I know they still can and don't, but if there's more money, I mean, football, 3 strings, every position. I mean, you have to have those in sports that are contact sports, that are dangerous sports if you want to continue to be successful. So,
well, that's why we're trying to do the 5-year contract guarantee. So now I could work with a 65 parent who says, look, I'm committed to the program. Well, as part of that commitment, it'd be great if I could put a final placement of you being on a team, not if you're going to be on a team. And if you do your due diligence for the next 5 years, you've got a spot. Now, as the old saying goes, right? You think your son is good? Cool. Put your money where your mouth is. You go ahead and you sign up for the program. You pay every month. And then at the end of those 5 years, you get your money back. So you've invested in you. I've been able to prove and validate that I can build a durable athlete. Now, let me give you a parking spot where you can take all, because I have a selfish interest. I want you to be super fast, durable. Now, I want to put you on my team. Why? Because I know your background. You're not lying to me, telling me that you don't have Epstein-Barr when you do. You're not lying to me, telling me that you've got a blown out ACL, but you do. And when I say lie, it's just unfortunately the environment says, hey, if you don't tell them the truth, you're definitely not going to get considered for the team. So what do? You don't tell the truth. That's stupid. If I can help cultivate a rider for 5 years, the parents can sleep at night. They realize they're investing in a process and a system. My investors are like, shit, you're bringing me 4 of the best riders? Yeah, we built them. And we did it in a healthy, sustainable manner, because now when they're 18 and they go pro, now my investors, they have somebody that can race for 5 years. We can do the things that we want to do. I'm not going to give away our secrets, but we're able to do things at the races that the sponsors want. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm listening to a sponsor. What is it that you need? Okay, we can provide that. When you provide it, sponsors will stay. And they don't really care if it's Johnny Blow out there, Joe Blow out there racing the dirt bike. If I'm entertaining a corporate client, they really don't care if my rider wins or not. They just say, hey, I got to hang out with some dude that's fast on a dirt bike. If you're doing it the right way. You and I get invited to go to an ice hockey. Like I live in Florida, right? Ice hockey is not my jam, right? But if I get invited to an ice hockey, it's cool. I can't even balance on ice. And to watch these guys go 16 different directions in a nanosecond, I'm impressed. But we're not there to talk about ice hockey. We're talking about our business partnership. Why are we missing
100%.
That?
Good
it's
stuff,
crazy,
Coach.
Man. I appreciate it very much. All the listeners. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah. Anything else you want to get off your chest, Coach?
Nope. Just thank you so much. Congratulations on your growth. And I just want to thank all the listeners. Thank you for the nice comments that you guys send me. I really do appreciate it. If I can ever help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Coach. Smartest man in the physiological training space that I know, and definitely the smartest in this sport. So thank you for your time, my man.
Appreciate you. Peace.